All right, hello. My name is Erebus, and I'm the creator of Lab Monster Toolkit, and I'm joined here with Evasion. If you don't know Evasion, he is a phenomenal Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 player. He took second place at EVO this year, so he's also a user of Lab Monster Toolkit, and I very much wanted to reach out to him and do a video to show how he uses the toolkit for training purposes and how he improves his game with it. So welcome and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Yeah, Lab Monster Toolkit definitely has helped me implement some things I couldn't before, since Marvel 3 is a kind of older game now. The training mode, while it was really good for the time, it's kind of showing its age, so it's kind of fills in the gaps.
Awesome, that's exactly what I designed it for, so that's really validating that it seems to be working out for you. So what I wanted to do is have you basically show people all of the finicky, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it because we're working with older games and every game works different. Lab Monster Toolkit has a lot of weird finicky setup stuff, but once you get past all of it, you can really make super powerful training things. So we're going to walk through opening it up, setting it up with Ultimate Marvel 3, and then show how you would build a sequence to train with. So go ahead and open the toolkit. We've got our controller unplugged for those of you paying attention at home. So we got the toolkit open here, and then we'll plug in the controller.
Size that a little bit.
There we go. I can see the controller got plugged in. You can just kind of hit buttons so yeah, you can see. So if you don't understand what's going on here, there's 3 columns. Column 1 and 2 are 2 virtual gamepads that the toolkit is creating, and the third column is the source controller, which is the controller he actually plugged in. So next we're going to go to UI input for player 1, and we're going to turbo the start button. So we'll check the turbo checkbox, and we'll check start, and that's just going to make it so that when we open Marvel 3, that controller is spamming start and A, and so that will be the controller that Marvel 3 interprets as controller 1. So let's just go ahead and open Marvel 3. Okay, so then we're going to focus the game and have that all looks good. All right, and we can switch it back to mirrored input before it gets too deep into the menus. And then we'll open up the training.
Awesome.
All right, so for this we're going to be doing what Spencer, Nova, Adu.
Yep.
And we'll do that on both. And after we get into training, we'll switch it to frame locked mode, and I'll want you to pull the task manager up so that we can see it on the screen so people know where to look.
Sounds good.
Now that that's loading in, so frame locking is a way for the toolkit to basically attach to the process and inject and basically add a hook to the input DLL so that it guarantees that it actually changes the it locks step frames with the actual software you're using. So you click the frame base thing up top, you go into your task manager, and you find the PID, process ID for the game, 24716, punch into the top there, and you hit connect to PID, and there you go. Now you're frame locked, you're good to go. So then the last thing we gotta do is switch player 2 to disabled input, because right now it's mirroring, or I guess you don't have to, just switch it to UI, and then turbo the start button so that it picks up the start for player 2, and there we go. Now player 2 is player 2. And then if you go to mirror input, you can show that you can move back and forth and show both players are being mirrored from one controller. So after all of that startup, we now have player 1 is the virtual controller for player 1 from Lab Monster Toolkit, player 2 is the virtual controller 2 from Lab Monster Toolkit, and your actual controller is player 3 and is completely being ignored by the game. And that is the setup that I really strongly recommend everyone use. So the other things that we're going to have, so why don't you go ahead and change the health before we forget, because I know that was one of the setup issues we had. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up some incoming mixes. So we're gonna we'll show recording one incoming mix so that you can see how we make it, but we've made several. So if you go back to the toolkit and disable player 2, so that it's not mirroring anymore. You'll be able to do it. And then really quickly, I just want you to open the bind hotkeys window so that people can see what the hotkeys are. So right now we've got a function hotkey bound, and then we've got a play sequence, a record, a stop record, and save button bound. And that function button works similar to Street Fighter 6's function button. So yeah, that's how we're going to do that. You can use the keyboard hotkeys, but Marvel 3 switches to keyboard input the moment you press a keyboard button, and so that can get kind of screwy with the game and the recording and everything else. So I really encourage people to use hotkeys on your arcade stick.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the hurdles I dealt with earlier, and yeah, it's definitely a lot easier to use the hotkeys in general.
Cool, so let's go ahead and close the hotkey window, because when it's open, it does not read hotkeys. And so what we'll do is we'll have you record just a Spencer incoming mix so that people can see how you would record this sequence. So now we're recording, that's what that red is over there. We're gonna just do a simple combo, kill, and then do the Spencer incoming. Cool. Okay. So we can save that.
And I'll
just call it Spencer. Yeah. And then we'll open it with the sequence editor so that we can take a look at it. So open the sequence editor, and we'll open it. And so there's going to be a few things that we're going to want to clean up with it. So obviously those two first button presses and probably the 36 frames after them, we would want to get rid of, because that's the start recording. The Toolkit won't record based off of the playback. It won't read hotkeys off of playback, but it's probably not something you want in your playback, so delete those, and then we'll scroll to the bottom. And then you might have put a reset in the bottom, so we can just delete that.
Like it.
And so then what we can do is save this, and just for the sake of testing it, we'll go ahead and close the window and load it into player 1. So we'll go to load sequence and load into player 1. And then we can switch to playback sequence for the mode in that column there. And then we'll switch player 2 to be mirror source input, so you will be controlling player 2 instead of player 1. And then you'll just... actually, you will need to switch mode to mirror on player 1 for a second just to reset the training. Right. So then you can switch 1 to playback, and we'll go ahead and play the sequence. Alright, so now the Toolkit is playing back the sequence, and Evasion's going to try to block this incoming. And he does, because he knows which side it's going to be on. So what we've done before this video is we've actually made 2 different versions of that sequence, and we've done something called a smart sequence. So we'll open up the smart editor there, and we'll just make it again so that people can see how to do this. So we'll go ahead and start with, we've got the start node there. So what we've done is we've got actually 3 sequences. We have another sequence that resets us to the corner position. So we'll start by going to a reset sequence. So go ahead and do the pull down, add a new node. We can add a playback sequence, and then we can rename that reset, and we'll load the sequence for the reset.
You said to add another sequence, correct?
So load the reset sequence from the file. Select the sequence for the reset sequence that we made earlier. There we go. And then for the next node, we'll add a new node. So, yeah, this is fine. And then we're going to do a random branch. And then we'll just back up a second here to the play node that we just made, the reset node. The next node for that one needs to be the new random branch node we just made. So go ahead and grab the next node for that play node. The third thing, yeah, that one right there. And then set it to be new node 1. And then there you go. All right, and then so for this, we're going to create 2 branches because we got to do the left and the right. So we're going to hit the plus button on the bottom. And then we're going to create 2 playback nodes for each branch. So we'll add new node.
Oh, this.
Yep.
Okay.
Add. Yeah, there you go. And then we're just going to do a playback sequence. And you're going to grab it from the sequence file. This is a thing I showed him today that for the smart sequence stuff, normally he was just doing this by playing one sequence at a time. But this was a workflow that, while you're not as familiar with, is clearly better. So add new node for the second one as well.
Yep.
And playback sequence. So then we've got 2 playback sequences down there, and we've got Spencer incoming 1, and then we'll do Spencer incoming 2 cross up. And then for the next node, we're going to have both of those next nodes go back to the start. So this is a graph that you're just kind of manually pointing where each node goes. And yeah, if we save this, it should just work. We can call that something Spencer loop. If it doesn't work, we did make the other one that we can always go back to, but I don't see why this wouldn't work. Although obviously on camera, everything is always funky. When editing this video, I realized that a mouse scroll caused one of the next nodes in the smart sequence to get incorrectly set. It causes the sequence to not play perfectly. It's just user error. So go ahead and load that sequence in there. And hit play. Yeah, you're good.
Cool.
There we go.
Yeah, yep. So it's working fine.
So now what's happening is, because the Lab Monster Toolkit is controlling player 1, you're able to have Lab Monster Toolkit reset the training every time. And so you just block the mix, it'll automatically reset the training after each time, and you just sit there and continue blocking mix. So, well, you can obviously talk about why this is useful.
So for me, we don't really have any Spencer players around here, or Nova Spencers especially. But it's really popular on Parsec, but the Midwest region in general doesn't really get too much out of Parsec because we're so far from both regions. We don't really get to take advantage and play against these players who have been like kind of dominating lately, like the Mundanks and the Liberal Terminators. So it's a super common matchup that I had to get used to. And a big reason I think I did so well at EVO was because I practiced against this incoming and practiced against Nova Spencer in general. And Lab Monster Toolkit was the only real reason I was able to do this, because I'm not a Nova Spencer player. I don't really know the exact timing of everything, so this would allow me to, make sure it was as tight as possible and figure out the timing of when it's going to cross up and be same side.
Right. So you can basically figure out the option select, figure out how to fuzzy it, the incoming, more or less.
Yeah, pretty much.
And obviously there are other versions of this mix. You mentioned to me that there's a delay throw. You mentioned to me that there's more layers that you can add. And obviously using this software and the way the smart sequence works, you can add those layers as other branches of the random select. So you can add as many random nodes to jump to as you want and weigh them however you want. And the other thing that we had discussed earlier was, some of these mixes are purely differences in how long you wait between doing some inputs. And the smart sequence editor allows you to put a random wait node into your, between 2 sequence playback nodes. So you can just split an incoming mix playback sequence in half at that wait point, put one of the playbacks before a wait node, put the other after the wait node, and just have you can open the smart editor so we can show it. So that just click new and just add a wait node.
Yep.
So the wait node, you have a maximum number of frames and a minimum number of frames, and it just randomly picks, right? And so it's very easy for you to say, okay, if instead of having the difference between 2 different recordings that have set frame values, you can have a random wait that, just makes it much more chaotic and much harder to guess, because it's more like how a human would do it, where it would be a lot more random.
Yeah, a good example I would say is Spencer has a 6-frame command throw, right? So on the times when you push block, you're minus 30 or whatever, so they dash up command throw you out of it. But if you did that perfectly, you obviously the command throw wouldn't hit because you're in push block stun. But a real human would wait long enough so you can make it wait and do the command grab at the right timing and things like that. And I think that stuff's really good. That would be the next idea on top of it. You would just add in dash command throw or dash under jab, and because there's other mix-ups afterwards, like you said. But it's just for getting the pure guess out of the way, the 50-50, it definitely helps to just grind that part before you start adding on additional layers.
Right. Why don't you open up the smart sequence we just made with Spencer?
Sure.
In the smart sequence editor. Sorry, I should have been more specific.
Oh, okay.
So then what we'll do is we'll save this as a new file to duplicate it. We'll do save as, and we'll call it the Nova loop. And we'll just add the 2 Nova sequences that we made earlier to this and show how easy it is to just swap this random branch to use sequences from another character. If we've now renamed it Nova Loop, and then for the 2 play nodes at the bottom, we just select the different sequences. So we select the Nova incoming, was it Nova incoming 1 and Nova incoming cross up, I think is what we called them. I can't remember.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, we'll just try that for now.
Yeah, if one of the, if they're both same side, then it may be that I think Nova same side is the one you want. That's the one we called it. Yeah, it was that.
Cool.
So then you just save this, and then you can reload it into the sequence slot for player 1, and then you can go into the game and play it. And
yep.
So part of this sequence, we added the hard tag so that it goes to Nova because we knew we were using this team. And now that's the same side. And he's going to
followed up on the combo. Yeah. So, my bad. But yeah.
No, there's nothing wrong with doing that. So yeah, you had told me that basically this Nova incoming and the Spencer incoming were like the 2 things that...
Yeah. This was like the biggest thing because I lost the Mundank at Frosty, and a big part of it was my inability to block. Like, that's a cross up, so
yeah,
that shows you right there. Like, sometimes you're like, if you're not aware and they're not like completely ready, like they're not 100% true guesses, but they're close enough that you know, you're gonna have to deal with them, and they're very strong. So I wanted to have I wanted to know a little more than just guessing. So I was
definitely
not really, yeah. So that was my plan. Like that one's really cheap. For characters that don't have double jumpers or air dash, it's not like a true guess, but it's one of those things that you have to get hit with it enough until you like kind of feel the tell of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. I really just wanted to show these 2 things off and really walk MVC3 players, like incredibly handhold them through how you would build this. You know, we didn't cover a lot of the stuff with the sequence editor. I am available on Twitter. I'm available on Discord if people, and I think the main way that I prefer to get feedback on this software is through the actual itch page. You can post comments on the itch.io page. Some users have done that too, but that's the main way to get my attention. And then if you know, we can move that conversation to Discord, and I'm very happy to very much handhold people through using the software because I want people to be able to use it. I don't want people to be able to, you know, improve with it. So yeah, it's just incredibly vindicating to see you do so incredibly well, and know that even if it was just a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely helped out a lot, and I'll be using it for way more stuff in the future now that I'm a little bit better with the smart sequences and stuff like that. Like, I definitely think the smart sequences are like really amazing because you can just have like a whole branch of paths that you can follow for incomings, because everyone knows Marvel 3 is just like a multi-layered game, but when you can like actually practice defending the first layer and then the following layers too, and just figure out like the answers for stuff, I think that's like a really like awesome tool that like we obviously wish was in the game, but you've made it possible for us to do that, so that's great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Why don't you shout yourself out? Obviously, yeah, you're a lot more famous than me, but let people know where they can find you anyway.
I'm Evasion HP on Twitter. Definitely follow me there. That's where I post the most. I have a YouTube channel. It's the same thing, HB_Evasion. That's my YouTube. I'll be making some more Marvel 3 related content. I'll be showing off more live monster toolkit sequences and stuff as I get better with it. Definitely, I want to be able to share. I think I mentioned it to you earlier. I want to be able to eventually share like files on like specific team pairings. So like a common one is like Zero Jam. Everyone knows Zero Jam's like really strong, right? But there is some tells where people aren't just blocking correctly, either because they are unfamiliar or because they haven't played against it enough. So I feel like if I could load up my incomings and put them in there and then have people like maybe try defending against it and other things and like Morgan Soulfist patterns and stuff like that, the whole community could like definitely step up their awareness a little bit.
That's right, yeah. One thing I should have mentioned earlier, and I thank you for bringing it up, is these files are just JSON files for all of the inputs, and so they're very easy to share. The only thing you have to make sure is that you've got, you know, whatever controller you have or whatever control style you have set up for your game needs to match the controls used for the input, because they are just raw inputs from the controller. But there are tools in the Lab Monster Toolkit to very easily remap an entire sequence to match a different control layout. So it's not a perfect tool, but if there's basically a one-to-one button mapping change from one controller to another, it's pretty straightforward. I think we will have the inputs that we used for these, so the smart sequence files and the actual 2 mix-up files and reset file for these smart sequences, I'm planning on getting from you, and we'll put in a link to a Google Drive or something so that it can be in the description for this YouTube, so that for people who want to play around with these mix-ups, they can pretty much, they don't have to go through the setup of actually recording it and making it. They might have to do a little bit of work in terms of making sure that your inputs match their inputs. And I'm going to be the first to admit that, I'm one person making this software, and I don't have a huge QA team or anything like that. It's just me and the people who I send it out to. So if there are bugs, and there will be bugs, I apologize. Let me know, and I will try to fix them as soon as possible. But there's also the reality that, like, sometimes my software isn't the issue. The issue is the game that it's working with, where it's just not reading inputs the way that you would expect, and it's a frame perfect input, and the game skipped that frame for whatever reason. Maybe your computer had a glitch. And so, like, that's just a reality of playing games with this software. I'm not saying it's never my software's fault. I'm just saying that, like, I've definitely run into issues where I'm like, that felt like it should have worked, and then when I look into it, I'm like, oh no, the game, like, my computer just, like, missed a frame, and that's why the recording dropped. Cool. All right. Well, once again, thank you so much. We'll have these sequences up. I really appreciate your time, and if you have any questions about Lab Monster Toolkit, please reach out to me. I'm Erebus Wolf on Twitter. I'm Erebus Wolf on Twitch. I'm Erebus Wolf on YouTube. You can find me at all of those locations. You can @ me, and you can put comments on this video. You can put comments on the itch.io page. Please, use this software to really pull apart these fighting games that don't have as good of training modes as we wish they did.